I'm sorry, you didn't hear me. I said, sure, that's fine.
Okay, right after the prayer.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Eastern Shore Delegation. Today is February 2nd, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We can please rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Senator Rosa, good morning, and if you'd please offer prayer for the group.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning, friends and colleagues. I'll turn to one of my favorites from Psalm 105. Give thanks to the Lord, proclaim his greatness, tell the nations what he has done, sing praise to the Lord, tell the wonderful things he has done. And I say this together because we have much to be grateful for as we work together. And in closing, I will say, let us ask our Heavenly Father to give us guidance and wisdom as we continue to work together on behalf of the people of Maryland's Eastern Shore. And we say together, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Senator. Members, I'd like to get an approval of the minutes from last week. Could I get a motion and a second, please?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Delegate Sample Hughes, I'd like to give you the floor. Good morning to you.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone from the Eastern Shore delegation and those who are joining us today. I just wanted to have an opportunity to recognize and remember the legacy of our former delegate Rudolph Corinthian Kane Sr. I had the opportunity last week on the floor to recognize him. Actually, it was this week, and his family was very, very grateful. As many of you know, that Delegate Kane represented District 37A respectfully for about 15 years, and he was the first African-American to serve, a Democrat from the Eastern Shore, and he always, as you are aware, stood by his convictions, made sure that all of the colleagues in the House and the Senate knew the value of the Eastern Shore, that fishermen, watermen, farmers, and all of those in between were important. He left a strong legacy where service to others was a priority. He served in the United States Army. He also worked diligently in the community with Shore Up Incorporated. And as we know, that Shore Up Incorporated canvasses the entire Eastern Shore by services for mostly children and seniors. And so to that end, it is just an honor, number one, to have known him and to know that his strength is what moves and motivates me as the person who had the opportunity to follow in his footsteps. So just in closing, he will be eulogized on tomorrow, which will be in Westover at St. James United Methodist Church, located on Chrisville Highway. The service tomorrow is at 11 a.m. This evening, there will be a viewing from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. also at the church in Westover. So, friends, just know that we had a jewel on the Eastern Shore, and if you can, feel free to continue to pray for his family, and by all means be able to attend the service if possible. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to recognize our former delegate Rudolph Corinthian Kane Sr.
Thank you, Delegate Sample Hughes, for the recognition. And Senator Carrozza had reached out to me last week and recommended we do a Eastern Shore delegation citation, which you have, I believe, in your possession now. And thank you for delivering that tomorrow. In addition, the delegation, according to the request of the family, made a donation in lieu of flowers. Wanted to let the members know that as well. Delegate Hornberger.
It would just say update for the Treasury. Is that going to be a check that we issue, or?
We'll work on that in the background, but yes. it'll
Thanks
have
so
to-
much, and thank you for alerting us of his service. Sorry I didn't get a chance to meet him, but I know that you carry on all those values for him, and I think that's really great for the shore and for your community.
Indeed. Thank you kindly.
Thank you very much. But before we start our meeting with Delmarva Chicken Association, last week we ran out of time and wanted to have Scott Evans with Benedictine come back on. Where we were headed last week was a letter of support, which we will vote for here directly. But Scott wanted to give you a chance to finish up your thoughts. I felt terrible about how that ended, but we hit a hard break. So good morning.
Good morning, and again, thank you for reaching out and extending the courtesy for me to come back and just touch briefly on the project as well as see if there's any questions. Again, the project that we're trying to accomplish has been funded in the past with capital dollars through the governor's budget. It's for updates to our school residential program. We support children from throughout Maryland with developmental disabilities who cannot be served in their local school systems. So we truly are a resource for the entire state and are funded entirely by the state for our operational dollars. So we're just trying to update our facilities with capital dollars in order to improve what we offer for our students. Again, I gave the entire kind of quick high-level talk last week. I appreciate everyone's support on this call. And for those who have visited campus, you truly don't understand until you see the work that's being done there, how important and vital what we do is. So I invite all of you, when you have time, I know session's a busy time, to come out and visit. And I'll take any questions. And again, thank you to Delegate Adams for reaching out and extending the courtesy.
Sure. I don't see any questions. Members, I did send everyone a letter. Hopefully we can get a motion in a second to support. This was one of our priorities from last year. We were able to have success with Shore Health and then also with Tidal Health. This was our third main priority. So would anybody be willing to make a motion in a second on the letter to the governor's office for the Benedictine school funding request?
Sure, move favorable on the letter.
Okay. I get a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed. Scott, we'll have that letter sent out before lunchtime
Right.
to the governor's office. And thank you for your patience with us as we were trying to cover a lot of agenda.
I understand. Thank you so much for inviting me back, and have a great day. Thank you.
All right, you do so. Holly Porter, Delmarva Chicken Association. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. How are you?
I'm well. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. So I'm going to try to talk and share screen at the same time. We're going to see how that goes. And you can also let me know whether I'm sharing an actual PowerPoint or if I'm sharing my notes with you.
Looks good.
Perfect. So again, good morning. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Holly Porter, the Executive Director of the Delmarva Chicken Association. We, of course, are the trade association that represents our chicken community here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland and really throughout all of Delmarva. I'm actually going to share some of my time with our board president, Miss Amy Seister. She'll come on here in a second. But before I do that, I also want to make sure that I recognize Grayson Middleton, our government affairs manager, who I know many of you know as well and see out and about in Annapolis. And know that both of us are available at any time with questions. But right now, I'm actually going to turn it over to our board president to talk and share a little bit of the latest stats that are right off the press of our industry. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the hot topics and priorities.
Good morning. Thank you, Holly. My name is Amy Seister. I am currently the president of the Delmarva Chicken Association. It's an honor to be speaking with you this morning on behalf of our 1,500 members. I am a poultry grower. My family operates 4 poultry farms in Delaware, and we raise over 1.5 million birds annually. I am also employed by an allied business, which is supporting the Delmarva chicken community by manufacturing litter amendments, which we use to help control ammonia in our broiler houses. So with that, we'll get started. The Delmarva chicken community is large. We have over 1,200 family farms raising broilers or larger birds on the Delmarva Peninsula. We have 5 chicken companies, which employ over 18,000 people. We also partner with university and the governments, as well as hundreds of allied businesses every day to keep this community moving forward. Delmarva is blessed to have 5 chicken companies who contract with family farmers to raise the birds, which then they harvest. Those companies, some of them you may recognize, others you may not. We have Allen Harim, Amick Farms, Mount Air, Tyson, and Purdue. So these numbers are hot off the press, as Holly had mentioned. We gathered this information from our chicken companies, and we'd like to share with you the hot numbers from 2023. We raised over 600 million birds last year, which produced 4.4 billion pounds of chicken. And I don't know if you keep up with the consumption rate, but chicken continues to increase in per capita consumption. Last year, we were over 100 pounds of consumption, estimated to be over 100 pounds of consumption within the United States. We had 1,263 family farms growing those birds for the chicken companies, which were grown in 4,900 houses. That equates to an average farm size of 3.8 houses per farm. And then once again, the chicken companies employ over 18,000 people as part of our community. And then the chicken companies themselves spent over $1.5 billion on corn, soybeans, wheat, and other feed ingredients to feed those chickens. Our GDP was actually $4.4 billion last year, which was down from $5 billion the year before. And that value is decreased because, as you've seen in the grocery store, the commodity price of chicken has come down. But that is cyclical, so we will see that come back up over time. So we did manage to pull out some Maryland numbers for you. Delaware and Maryland are very similar in their composition or breakdown of numbers. But last year in Maryland specifically, we grew over 62 million birds, and there were over 2,000 houses raised on 572 poultry farms or growers. Let's see, just the economic impact to Maryland is huge. You can see that the average, wages and benefits was $51,200, but we are significantly adding to the economic impact in Maryland with our production on the Eastern Shore. Last year, we produced over 600 million pounds of chicken, which you can see the impact from COVID. We are almost back to 2018 production numbers. And we produced over 4 billion pounds of chicken last year. And the number of chicken houses has decreased slightly over the last several years, but the efficiencies in our housing construction is allowing us to grow more with less houses on Delmarva. And then our numbers of growers is also decreasing. And that goes back to our farm sizes have become a little bit larger, but there's still 3.8 houses per family farm. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Holly to cover some hot topics. Thank you for the opportunity to present today.
So again, a couple topics that are out there that I just wanted to bring to the forefront. High path avian influenza, unfortunately, is still with us nationwide. We did have a case here in Caroline County in November of this year, knocking on a lot of wood. It appeared to be sort of what we would call a one and done, which is great. But I think, again, it's so important to remember that, our partnership with the Maryland Department of Agriculture, our partnerships with USDA are really, really important for mitigating and eradicating this disease. And of course, all of the steps that our growers, our allied businesses, our chicken companies take when it comes to biosecurity are really, really important. And I think, again, that's where we have been really good at really stepping up on that biosecurity. Again, throughout the rest of the country, we're still seeing a number of cases of AI. As a matter of fact, over the past month, California has had millions of birds that have had to be depopulated. So unfortunately, this strain is sticking with us, whether we like it or not. So, again, it's definitely a concern, but we really appreciate the partnership and working with MDA in making sure that should we have cases, we can make sure that they're managed. I will go ahead and bring up a discussion that I know many folks have been hearing over the past month or so, and that is around dissolved air flotation residuals. I did share a frequently asked questions that I believe Betsy is going to share out with the legislators. There is a lot of misinformation that has been floating around over the past 6 to 12 weeks. And I just want to make sure that folks understand that these DAF residuals right now currently in the state of Maryland are regulated, and they're regulated as a registered soil conditioner, which falls under the Maryland Department of Agriculture. And we also have a number of farmers that have been using these DAF residuals for years. And as a matter of fact, we have a number of farmers who have been storing these DAF residuals for years that folks, may or may not have known as well too. All of when these are land applied, they have to be part of a nutrient management plan. Again, that falls under the Maryland Department of Agriculture. So we make sure that we're not over applying nutrients just like any other nutrients that we have. We know that there have been some discussions about bills. We have been trying to work with, in particular, the Caroline County Commissioners to help them in what we think could be some solutions within the county where they really have the ability to do permitting. They can add permitting restrictions, zoning, and planning, all things that the county at this moment in time have the ability to do. Would require some changes within their laws, but we are happy to help in making and even offering some suggestions, specifically when it comes to storage, which has been the big case. And again, even within the industry, we understand what the big issues tend to be. And we are working and have been working for years on what are ways that we can try to mitigate odor that seems to be the big topic in particular. And so those are some things that we are working on. We have also had several discussions with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, as we are aware that they and Shore Rivers were also looking at putting in a bill. I believe there is some draft language out there, but it has not actually been dropped yet. And we're having a number of discussions with them. We do feel that there are certainly some things that we can do to make things better, to potentially have some additional accounting, reporting, testing, and we're not opposed to those at all. But we do believe that this, again, is a registered soil conditioner, and it really should stay under the authority of the Maryland Department of Agriculture in making sure that we're working through the correct agency and making sure we're working through this case. Finally, I will just touch on a couple of our key priorities as an association. And we have a couple others that as bills come up, we will take positions on. But really at this point in time, there were 3 things that we wanted to touch on. Climate legislation, again, we've been watching and monitoring that very closely. We recognize the threats of climate change. And again, we believe agriculture is a big help in some of those issues. But we just want to make sure that any solutions are science-based and economically feasible. We are at this point in time not supportive of anything that would have electric farm equipment or heavy-duty trucks because it's just really not feasible at this given moment in time. Solar, I will not go into too much detail because I know Carol Bean is on the agenda. But I think our number one issue, quite honestly, is the fact that we have a number of growers who are using solar and a number of growers who would like to add more solar. And our issue really comes down to infrastructure. And I think this is something that isn't talked about enough. But when, utility scale solar comes in and basically, brings the grid to a halt because they've used it all up, and then growers can't use solar on their own farms for their own electricity needs, That to me is a big concern. And I think it really needs to be looked at to make sure, again, we know that we have these mandates. We know how much has to be out there. Everybody should have the ability to be able to use solar, but our infrastructure and our grid needs to be looked at in order to make that happen. And finally, environmental justice, we know, is an important topic of conversation, and we're very supportive of that. We are concerned with any legislation that may prolong the permitting process, especially when it comes to our general CAFO permit. So this is the permit that most of our farmers have to get from the Department of Environment. It is a general permit, which means there are basically 9 principles that all growers have to follow. And so we have concerns when there's discussion about legislation where, depending upon a score, may have additional requirements for permitting, which also may slow down that permitting. We've had some discussions with, the potential bill sponsor. And again, I think we're trying to get more questions answered at this point in time. With that being said, I think I've actually managed to stay within our time frame. And again, just really appreciate the opportunity to be here with everyone and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Holly. And before we get to questions, I'll see if anybody raises their hand. Yesterday, we were in our Committee Economic Matters talking about solar. I know you don't want to talk a whole lot about it, but what they've said through Maryland Energy Administration is that we need well over 25,000 acres of solar to meet these ambitious goals over the next 10 years. So the policy challenges are painfully obvious. On the Eastern Shore, we're flat, tilled land, no trees, and that there is a reasonable expectation. While the director, Paul Pinsky, said that there's no mandate that these get sited on the Eastern Shore, it's pretty obvious to me as a policymaker that it's coming our way. Well, it's already here. And when I hear you say, and I just want to make sure I understand your organization's position on this, when you hear those numbers, you're not in opposition to those numbers, or are you trying to balance local land use and a private property owner's rights to use land as they wish, but at the same time, we need to maintain our industry? So I'd like to have you kind of restate kind of the position, so I'm able to reflect that back when I'm making policy in committee.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, this year in particular, we really sat down to take a look at that, because when we were starting to hear some of those same numbers, we had some of the same concerns that it was definitely headed to the Eastern Shore. So, our position is that we would like to see this any solar be put on already built land.
Yes.
And, we do not want it to be on prime agricultural land. We respect farmers' rights and property owners' rights. But when you start removing prime agricultural land, the likelihood that that will ever go back to prime agricultural land just doesn't seem high, in our opinion. So we also very supportive of these going on state-owned land as well too, and open space. And again, for us, the big issue even more so is the infrastructure. When utility scale comes on and shuts down, the grid area, that's a problem when, again, we have growers where their number one costs are electricity. So if they have the funds and are willing to invest in solar on their farms, but then are told no, that really just seems to go against the policy overall.
Okay. All right. Holly, I don't know that I see any questions, so I want to thank you.
If I may, I forgot one very, very important thing, and that is to mention Chicken Day in Annapolis, which I think everyone usually looks forward to. So again, if you don't have it on your calendar, Friday, February 16th, it will be at the Governor Calvert House from 11 to 1. And we'll look forward to, of course, feeding everyone chicken, but also visiting with everyone. And we'll have our virtual reality goggles out for anyone that wants to take a tour of a chicken house while they're sitting in Annapolis.
We'll be there.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And to the members and presenters, around 9:30, I believe a number of our members have an AELR committee meeting. We'll have to jump off. Just wanted to inform the body at large that that's going to happen. All right, next up is Chesapeake Bay Trust and the Maryland Agricultural Education Foundation. Dr. Jana Davis and Suzanne Richards, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the delegation. I know we're a little behind time, so I'll be very quick and turn it over to Suzanne from MAPE, the Ag Tag folks. So we are the two license plate organizations. This is my old school screen sharing. the Chesapeake Bay and Coastal Bays, hopefully soon, Senator Croza license plate, and the agricultural plate. You all created my organization, the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and both tags. So we feel it's important to bring back to you what those tags are doing in your districts. I see a lot of champions on the call, and I see Delegate Jacobs, who himself has been a grantee of the Chesapeake Bay Trust back in his former life. So I'm going to very quickly share my screen and tell you a tiny bit about the trust. So the Chesapeake Bay Trust, created by you all back in the 80s, is a way to really reach groups on the ground. And you all created at that time, we don't have a direct appropriation from you. We're a quasi-state entity, but also a 501c3. You created the license plate and a tax checkoff. And every year we tell you exactly what we do in your districts. Here's an example of an annual report that you might have gotten recently, and a little look at exactly all of the grants that we make. We're very transparent. We tell you every grant that we make in the districts and in the general region. And in addition, we can supply you with this. If we were in person like the old days, you would all have a handout of this. We can send it around, a list of all of the grants that are only on the Eastern Shore, so you can get a sense of the breadth of the types of projects. We would love to make more grants. Senator Croza and I talked recently about making more grants on the Lower Shore, and really want to make sure that your constituents know that this is an opportunity for them. We run a number of different grant programs for all sorts of K through 12 environmental education, homeowners, faith-based groups. A lot of churches, synagogues, mosques have parking lots that they'd like to put rain gardens on, things of that nature. We like to meet people where they are and have community-based grants. So that's the Chesapeake Bay, and hopefully soon Chesapeake Bay and Coastal Bay's license plate. And I'll turn it over now to Suzanne from MAIF to talk about the ag tag.
Thank you, Jana. I'm Suzanne Richards with the Maryland Agricultural Education Foundation. We have the lovely license plates, and I just want to share my screen real quick and tell you what MAIF is doing on the Eastern Shore over the past year. We visited with 16 elementary schools with their mobile science labs. They pull up to elementary schools and do a lesson with each class as they cycle through the entire school based on agriculture. For a lot of students, it's their first exposure to science education. So it's really important to get it out there. Also uses the context of agriculture to keep everything relevant and interesting for the kids. Whoa, my screen wasn't supposed to do that. Sorry about that. Over 8,000 students reached with in-person ag education. Our amazing Maryland Agriculture Showcase, which attends public events, reached over 14,000 people. Of course, we have really strong FFA chapters on the shore. FFA used to stand for Future Farmers of America. Now it's just FFA, sort of reflecting that broader sense of careers and opportunities available in agriculture. We have Ag Literacy Week coming up in March. Last year, we reached over 1,000 students with a program that matches farmers and people who are in the farming industry to come into elementary schools, read an ag accurate book, and share an activity with the students just to get them a little more familiar with their local farmers. And then we funded a couple of grants for 2 different projects on the Eastern Shore. Of course, we're really busy all the time helping support our ag teachers in the different programs. I see a number of familiar faces in the audience today. Hello to everybody. So great to see so many of you last night at Taste of Maryland Agriculture. I'm actually still at Live Casino, so if anybody needs a bet place, let me know. You can reach me here. This is my contact information. If you have any other questions about MAIF or what we're doing, we would love to answer them for you. We'll take any questions now if needed.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I'll give the members a couple of seconds to see if they have any questions.
No questions, no bets.
It looks like we're all covered from last night.
It was a great evening.
Absolutely. Okay. I think we're in good shape, and thank you for presenting today.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good day. All right. Next up, members, we have the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, Carol Bean and Joe Hickman.
Good morning. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. Just wanted to give a very brief overview about some of our work that we've been doing focused around solar siting. That's been an issue of concern to us as we look as a land conservancy towards the potential impacts to the land use and ultimately the agricultural viability. I'm going to do a super duper quick brief overview, but we're joined here today by one of our longtime board members, Joe Hickman, and I want to make sure that I have give time for him to speak. I think in this conversation when we're talking about using agricultural lands, the most important voices are we should be listening to are the voices of the farmers. So I really want to make time for him. So real quick. Hopefully, hopefully you can see that. Hopefully most of you are familiar with the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy. We're the leading land trust in Maryland in the state. And we've protected about over 56,000 acres permanently on the Eastern Shore. We hold over 300 conservation easements when we work in 6 counties between Lower Cecil down through Dorchester. And our mission, as you see, really is focused on conserving, stewarding, and advocating for the beautiful Eastern Shore. And one of the ways that we do that, most people are sort of familiar with our, oh, how do I get to the next slide? Most people are familiar with our conservation easements, but we are actively engaged in land use and policy advocacy. And so when we look on the landscape today, there's you can't help but focus on issues of solar siting. So when DNR's own website projects it, and this is a little bit older, it might be more now, about 70% to be sited on the Eastern Shore. And I think Holly spoke very well about the concerns about the type of projects and who those projects are serving. And when we really view those utility scale projects, particularly as an industrialization of agricultural land. And we've been working for months with a broad group of stakeholders, representatives from all the solar industries, League of Conservation Voters, and others. We worked really hard to craft some comprehensive policy suggestions that would address some of the solar siting issues, address equitable distribution, farmland protection, and in the literal 11th hour there, the solar industry sort of proposed their solution, and that was the only one they were going to support. So some of the suggestions that we contributed to those conversations were borrowing from some of the other models. That's not unique to Maryland. Maryland's not the only one grappling with this issue of farmland protection and renewable energy. So one of the things that we came up with was a mitigation fee. So this is something that was recommended in the task force release under Hogan administration. And you're seeing this enacted in other states around the nation. So our proposal was a mitigation fee that could be tiered, accounting for farm soils. It could be maybe discounted for certain best practices or for serving certain communities. But basically a way to level the playing field. So development is, as you all know, happening because it's perceived these cheap land and a better return on investment for the developers. So we really advocate taking a longer term view and looking realistically at the long-term full cost impacts to removing significant agriculture from production here on the Eastern Shore. So we do have bill language drafted on this concept. There's some piece of this idea that has, I believe, going to be in some legislation through Senator Hester and Delegate Ziegler. We really would like to see a mitigation fee mandated at the state level and implemented through the county. But the idea would be really that it's the funding would go to fund farm preservation. So it's not overly prescriptive. It's still up to sort of landowner choice if they want to use their land for solar in some way, shape, or form, but it's also voluntary for conservation. And this is a way to augment conservation in the same communities where these installations are being installed. So it could be one mechanism to help to try to keep an equitable balance within a county so that for every acre developed, there's the potential for an acre being preserved. And I'll say one of my, this to me, we've been hearing a lot from solar developers, and it to me, it's just it's a striking way to look at it. You've got, in our conversations with many of the developers, they'll continually refer to solar as a type of farmland preservation. And as I hope this picture is making clear, that is not farmland protection. It's an industrial commercial scale, and really of an unregulated utility is sort of how these solar developers are operating. So I'd love to have Joe share some of his experiences. He has, I think at last time we talked, he said he had a stack waist high of solar proposals. So Joe, I'm sure everybody would appreciate your perspective here.
Thank you, Carol, and thanks to the delegation for allowing me this little Kent County Farm Board to talk with you all. I went to the MDA's Ag Solar Summit, and Secretary Pinsky reiterated what Chair Adams said about the 25. He said 20 to 30,000 acres, and that's with the wind turbines being built off Ocean City, which will not be built likely due to cost, if nothing else. And the practical end of that is that somewhere on the shore, there's probably 15 to 30 young or vulnerable farm operations that will go out of business during that time. And that's the practical end. The well-heeled farmers and that have capital and can maintain their land. But what I have, and I just grabbed this week's letters, most farmers, grain farmers probably, they own maybe 40% of the land they till, and the rest is owned by other people, retired farmers, absentee owners, schools, institutions, whatever. But the landowners are getting these letters. And average farm rents in the upper shore, probably plus or minus 200 acres is a good working number. Here's per acre lease rates from Alder Energy, 2,500, Little River Renewables, 4,000 an acre. Air Arena Renewables, 2,500 an acre. These are annual rent payments. 4,000 from Ameresco Sustainable. Chaberton Energy, 3,500. Prospect 4, 5,000. And that's the competition out there. That's the reality. And I think if we don't do something, the MDA at one of the ag breakfasts here gave a nice proposal, Deputy Secretary Connolly, and he said the three issues that MDA was looking at was correcting nutrient management program, deer management, and solar siting. And I just think the solar siting has got to be way up here. I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of acres, and it'll be on the shore, like Chair Adams said. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Carol, do you have anything else to add, or shall we?
No, I would just, I would just like to close and say, I did mention the mitigation language. We just day before yesterday got some draft language back from DLS. And so I'm going to circulate that to all of you. There could be some, we as of yet don't have a sponsor. So I wanted to mention that. We have been trying to maybe see if some of those concepts can get into the Ziegler and Hester but with changes. But I wanted to just make you aware of that proposal. We're going to be sending that out to all of you, if not to sponsor, to just give another idea of some potential mitigation measures that we can kind of proactively start to, get some best practices and things like that that we need to have happen.
Joe, sharing your story is it's a shocking realization. Yeah, literally yesterday we were having this briefing I referenced with Delmarva Poultry or Delmarva Chicken Industry, and the message they were sharing was this is free market. This is private property owners that are farmers, and they're making choices to do things. And one of the questions that should have been asked to the director of MEA and was not was the fact that he is the grant administrator, the facilitator of a lot of this money. What ends up being it is government picking winners and losers, right? It's taking dollars and in a way that's not free market. It's very tilted. And when you're saying a land use for farmers has X dollar value, but if somebody gets paid off in 5 times or 10 times what the traditional land use value is. It's striking the policy conversation we're having, because at one level, somebody like me will say, well, local landowners should have a right to do as they please. It's their land. At the same time, your story is sharing sort of this tilted reality. And what's most important, I'll ask the question to the both of you, is each county has a comprehensive plan. I mean, there's zoning, there are discussions of what's going to be agriculture, what's going to be industrial, residential, all these things. And so in the solar conversation, it tends to get lost that the counties have a tremendous, or should have a tremendous amount of say in what land use looks like. And it seems like that we're bypassing, if you don't mind me asking this question to get your confirmation or opposition to my point, but we're bypassing local counties who can and should be having the authority to make these decisions for the citizens of each county, right? I mean, if the citizens of Montgomery County want to take 80% of their farmland and turn it into solar, well, I guess that the county council and their zoning authorities can do that. But if in Wicomico County, for example, my home county, they come to a different conclusion, we should respect that. And ultimately, that's the question: are the counties able to maintain that authority, or are you seeing that being diminished, or is it just not there?
I think we've lost the authority. I mean, it's the preemption, and I hate to take up time, but a brief at the Bob Szynski, I think, is with DNR, the plant, they've reviewed solar, and we had one come through Kent County, and I don't happen to be on the Kent County Planning Commission, but it came through when there was no preemption, and they had a plan. I didn't like it completely, but it had landscaping, walking trails, water access. They really did a beautiful job. Preemption came, the same project came back again now with no standards. They dropped went to minimum buffers standards, and they're fighting over that because we don't have any control. All we do is review it, but we have the due process is gone. So it's really unfortunate. And I think we believe in solar. I think we allow it in our zoning here, and I know Queen Anne's and they all allow it. We all allow it. It's just where we put it, and that's the problem.
Right.
So.
Right. Is the legislation that you're working on, Carol, responsive to the local control aspect, or is that?
Well, it is in the sense we do advocate for, since there is this issue of preemption and the state sort of taking that role, that the state should also then take that role and mandate, make the commitment to, acknowledge that it's a concern, the loss of farmland, and to implement the Hogan recommendation for a mitigation fee. And it's certainly not a perfect solution, but the idea of reallocating through existing programs, it's not creating something new. If you did this mitigation, it would go to county mouth, then it at least becomes some mechanism whereby you can maybe try to get some equilibrium within that county. So it's not addressing these overarching goals, and challenges that are presented by preemption, but I think it can be one tool. And if nothing else, it's getting people focused on the right conversation, which is what's the most appropriate use of this farmland? What other roles is it playing that help to get us to the place where we're meeting our climate goals, that and helps them to deal with the challenges? They're just like everybody else dealing with issues related to climate. So how do we help for ag resiliency and help our rural communities as we combat in our own way these issues of sea level rise and saltwater intrusion and things of that?
Yeah, very good. All right. Well, I don't see any questions. I'll just close by saying it's not lost on me that on the agenda today was Delmarva Chicken Association, which is our core industry. So much else derives tertiary from that. And Chesapeake Bay Trust and the Maryland Agricultural Education Foundation, that speaks to our future. And here we are talking about, frankly, one of the most important subjects that I think is in front of our rural Eastern Shore, which is preservation of land use as we maintain our economic sustainability on the shore, which has to be, agriculture. Paul Pinsky, I'm talking too much here, but he had on his spreadsheet or his PowerPoint yesterday a picture of these solar panels on the ground with sheep that were grazing underneath the solar panels, and his position on this is agriculture. This is where we're trying to cite solar and still have an agriculture component. Well, I didn't want to get into it, but I'm like, unless you can run a combine under a solar panel field, it's not agriculture, not in a meaningful industrial sense. So thank you for your being with us today. It was eye-opening to see that one photo there and what's facing our delegation in the years to come. Thank you.
Well, if we can
Thank
be
you
a
very
resource,
much.
please reach out. We'd love to
Absolutely.
participate in these conversations.
All right. Have a good day. Members, we are on time today. DLS had a specific time they wanted to start, and they're going to get it. It's Hiram Birch, Arnold Aja, and Valerie Monroe with an important annual fiscal briefing that normally includes the local government part. But we're happy to have you, and it looks like the agenda is open for as much time as you wish. So thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you. Good morning. With me is Arnold Aja and Valerie Monroe. They are part of our state aid team. And before I get started, Arnold is going to share the screen and show you where our resources are on our webpage. All of the information that I'm presenting this morning is available on the DLS webpage. So, Arnold, if you're able to So when you go to the Maryland General Assembly's webpage, you can go to the top right to Legislative Services. And once you are on our DLS homepage, you can select Budget. And right below Budget is State Aid to Local Governments. And towards the left under the Session Reports, we have the State Aid Overview Report, which I will be presenting this morning. And also below that, under Local Fiscal Briefing, is special information for the Eastern Shore. So if you select the Eastern Shore tab, you will get our speaking points for today under the State Aid to Eastern Shore, and also a special presentation that we put together on disparity grant funding on the Eastern Shore. So those are our different resources. And also, if you want to have county-by-county charts by program, you can go under the State Aid Reports, under 2-year charts by program, and we'll give you, under the 2-year charts by program, Arnold, if you select that, it kind of shows you by program how much your jurisdiction will be receiving in education, library, and other government funds. So now we're going to go to our State Aid Overview Report. And if you turn to page 1 of the report, you can see that the state aid is a very large share of the state budget. It accounts for around 1/3 of general fund expenditures and around 26% of state funds. State aid to local governments will total around $8.4 billion in general funds and around $10.8 billion in state funds. On the next page, you see that most of the state aid is provided to local school systems. The public school systems will get around 76% of the funds, and payments for retirement for teachers, librarians, and community colleges is around 9% of the funds. Less than 10% of state funds will go back to the county governments and municipalities. On page 3, it kind of breaks down the amount of funds for each jurisdiction. You can see that of the 9 counties on the Eastern Shore, they would get around $859 million in FY25. This is a $40 million increase from the prior year. Of this amount, around $786 million will go directly back to the counties and local school systems in direct aid, and around $73 million is allocated for teachers' retirement payments. And as you can see to the right, on a per capita basis, state aid ranges from around $960 in Talbot County to over $2,900 in Caroline County. And as you can see, Caroline County ranks number 2 in the state in their per capita state funding. And also of the 5 highest jurisdictions with per capita funding, 4 of them are located on the Eastern Shore: Caroline, Dorchester, Somerset, and Wicomico. Around 70% of state aid is allocated by local wealth, which is based on property wealth and net taxable income. And the philosophy behind this is that jurisdictions with a lower tax base should receive a greater support from the state. We're now going to shift our focus to some of the specific funding categories. We're going to start off with public safety. So we turn to page 12. You can see that jurisdictions on the Eastern Shore will get around $4.8 million in the existing police aid formula, and around $3 million in enhanced funding under the enhancement program, which is based on violent crime offenses. The majority of state funding under the police aid formula is based on population density, so the more urbanized jurisdictions receive a higher share of funding. If we turn to page 16, it shows you the allocation of funding for the fire and rescue aid. And on page 18, it gives you the allocation amount for each jurisdiction. There you see that jurisdictions on the Eastern Shore get around $2.9 million in funding. And the allocations are based on the number of property tax accounts. On page 19 shows funding trends for local health departments. And here you'll see that the Eastern Shore would get around $28.7 million in local health grants in FY25. We are now going to shift our focus to transportation aid. And on page 23, it shows you the allocation of funds for jurisdictions, both for the county government and also for municipal governments. And you can see that the Eastern Shore would get around $26.3 million in local highway user revenues in FY25. This represents a $3.9 million increase, or a 17.5% increase over the prior year. The county and municipal share is based on road mileage and vehicle registration. County governments would get around $13.8 million, and municipal governments would get around $12.5 million. It should be noted that the Budget and Reconciliation Act includes a provision that would revert funding for the highway user revenues back to the fiscal 2024 allocation. And I think, Arnold, if we go back to page 20, you'll see that currently around 18% of the revenue in the gasoline motor vehicle revenue account goes to local governments in the form of local highway user revenues. It is under current law that amount increases till it gets to 20% in FY26. However, the Budget Reconciliation Act would revert funding back to the FY24 level. And this would result in a $6.5 million reduction in highway user revenues in both FY26 and FY27. So that provision will have a significant impact on funding for the Eastern Shore. If we turn to page 26, we'll now talk about the Disparity Grant Program. And this program provides state funding to the less affluent jurisdictions, and it tries to provide additional revenue in order for jurisdictions to receive at least 75% of funding on the local income tax rate to the statewide average. Now, 4 counties on the Eastern Shore receives funding under this program. It'll be Caroline, Dorchester, Somerset, and Wicomico County. Funding will total $28.4 million in FY25. This represents a $3.6 million or 11.2% decrease. And this is shown on page 20. 8. It kind of shows you the difference in funding from FY24 and FY25. The primary reason for the decrease in funding this year is due to the narrowing of income disparities across the state. Last year in FY24, jurisdictions realized a record increase in funding under the Disparity Grant Program. And that was due to the fact that in tax year 2021, there was a significant increase in net taxable income in the more affluent jurisdictions. And those increases surpassed those increases of disparity grant counties. So that resulted in a wider disparity among jurisdictions. However, in tax year 2022, the disparities narrowed because the increase in net taxable income in the disparity grant counties were actually higher than some of the more affluent jurisdictions. And in fact, some of the more affluent jurisdictions like Montgomery and Howard had actually decreases in their net taxable income for tax year 2022. Another factor that's contributing to a decrease in funding, particularly in Cecil County, is the fact that the Disparity Grant Program incorporates a minimum funding level that is based on local tax effort. Jurisdictions that has the maximum 3.2% local income tax rate receives a 75% guarantee of the formula amount. When you reduce your tax rates below 2.8%, the minimum funding level decreases. And that is what has happened in Cecil County. Cecil County has reduced their local income tax rate from 2.8% to 2.75% in tax year 24. And that basically removes the county from being eligible for funding under the program. So they will receive a $1.1 million decrease in funding in FY25. And we have a much more comprehensive analysis on the Disparity Grant Program and how it is actually calculated under our session reports under the local fiscal briefing with charts that kind of explains the different factors that is driving the funding for FY25. If you turn to page 29, it shows the gaming impact grants for FY25. It shows here that Cecil County will get $4.8 million and Worcester County will get $5.6 million in funding. We will now shift our attention to funding for the public school systems, and this is where most of the state aid is allocated. So if you turn to page 30, you will see that around 85% of state aid to local governments will go to support the public school systems. The 9 local school systems on the Eastern Shore will get around $639.4 million in direct aid in FY25. This represents a $25.6 million increase from the prior year. In addition, the state will provide $67.2 million in teachers' retirement payments. And as you can see at the top, the funding for local school systems varies considerably. Statewide, it's around $10,640. That ranges from around $6,000 in Worcester County to over $18,000 in Somerset County. The majority of state education aid is allocated based on local wealth. And you can see that 3 other local school systems on the Eastern Shore, Caroline, Dorchester, and Wicomico, is ranked in the top 6. And Cecil County is ranked 10th, and it's above the statewide average. If you turn to page 31, it kind of shows you the allocation of state aid for direct aid and for teachers' retirement. Direct aid is allocated based by local wealth. Teachers' retirement payment does not incorporate a local wealth measure. It's just based on the teacher's salary base and the retirement contribution rate. So there you can see that in Worcester County, it ranks number 1 in state teachers' retirement payments, but it ranks last in support for direct aid. It should be noted that Worcester County has one of the highest total per pupil spending for public schools. The difference comes from their local appropriation. So that's why their teachers' retirement payments are very high. It's because they overall has a high level of spending. If we turn to page 32, it shows the funding increase on a per pupil basis. You can see that statewide, per pupil direct aid goes up by 3.2%. Some jurisdictions on the Eastern Shore will realize a larger increase. You can see that Dorchester County's per pupil direct aid is going up by 12.1%. You also see that Worcester County and Talbot County's state aid is going up by 5.6% and 4.8%, respectively. Page 33 kind of shows you the main factors that drives funding for direct education aid. And one is student enrollment growth, and the other is the change in local wealth per pupil. Jurisdictions with a larger student enrollment growth tends to have a higher level of state aid increases. In addition, changes in your local wealth also has a direct impact on how much funding you receive. You can see that Allegheny County's funded local wealth per pupil went down by 12.1% this year, and that was one of the main drivers of their direct aid. And you can see that for Dorchester County, they had a above average increase in student enrollment of 1.6%, and they also had a lower increase in their local wealth, which helps drives their 12.1% increase in their direct aid. Page 34 provides information on the main education funding programs. And this includes the foundation program, the comparable wage index, and the guaranteed tax base. It also puts it on a per pupil basis. Page 35 gives you information on state funding under the Blueprint initiatives. Here, the local school systems on the Eastern Shore would get around $57.9 million in state funding under the Blueprint. This includes $3.1 million for supplemental instruction, $26.7 million for concentration of poverty grants, and $21.8 million for full-day pre-kindergarten. It should be noted that funding under the Blueprint is primarily targeted to low wealth jurisdictions and also students that need additional resources. And that is why a significant amount of funding, over half of it, is targeted to jurisdictions with a high concentration of poverty. If you turn to the next page, it basically shows you three additional targeted groups: compensatory education, which is based on the free and reduced price meal count, English language learners, and special education programs. In total, local school systems on the Eastern Shore will receive around $235.2 million in these targeted programs. Okay, and the following page, page 37, kind of shows you the main factors that are drives targeted funding. One is your targeted student index, and the other is your local wealth per pupil. The targeted student index basically measures the percent of the student enrollment in each local school system that comprises free reduced price meal students, English language learners, and also your special education. And the reason why jurisdictions like Dorchester, Prince George's, and Baltimore City, and Somerset are above 100 is because some of those students, particularly English language learners, can also be a free reduced price meal student. So there is some double counting of the students. But you can see that the targeted student index ranges from around 42% in Carroll County to over 100% in Somerset, Dorchester, Prince George's, and Baltimore City. And jurisdictions with a higher targeted student index basically indicates that those school systems have higher educational needs, that they need additional resources than your typical, than other school systems. On the Eastern Shore, you can see that Queen Anne's County has a lower targeted index as compared to Dorchester County and Somerset. but most of the local school systems on the Eastern Shore tends to have a higher targeted student index. Page 39 kind of starts to go over information on local wealth per pupil. And as you turn to page 40, it kind of breaks it down by property wealth and income wealth. Some jurisdictions like Worcester County tends to have a higher property wealth as compared to their income wealth. And if you turn to page 41, okay, and turn to the next page, 42, this kind of puts it on kind of ranks it. So you can see that Worcester County and Talbot County has a rank number 1 and 2 on per pupil property wealth, whereas Worcester County is ranked number 7 on income wealth. So this kind of shows you which jurisdiction's tax base is stronger, and also kind of compares it as your property base stronger than your income base. If you turn to page 44, this basically kind of shows you the two primary local income tax sources for local governments. That's your property tax base and your income tax base. Statewide, around 57% of local revenue, when you look at these two sources, comes from property, and 43% comes from income. And that's the primary reason why we weight property wealth more than income wealth. If you turn to page 43, sorry, you can see that when you look at the local wealth calculation, around 60% of it is based on property and less than 40% is based on income. So when we look at the local wealth base, which is one of the main factors that drives your local aid allocations, it's actually measuring the local tax base that the local governments collects their revenues from. So I think it's a very good measure on the ability of local governments to fund the local school systems. If you turn to page 45, it starts to give you some information on student enrollment growth. And this is the second factor that drives your education funding, is your student enrollment growth. And here you can see that statewide student enrollment is going up by 0.1%. And 5 local school systems on the Eastern Shore are posting gains in their student enrollment. And they are Dorchester, Queen Anne, Somerset, Talbot, and Wycomico. The other 4 local school systems are realizing a decrease in their funding. The next page, 46, kind of shows you that there is a high percentage of students on the Eastern Shore that are eligible for the free and reduced price meal count. And what I think is amazing is that if you look statewide, over half of the public school students in Maryland are eligible for free and reduced price meals. And I think studies have indicated that these students need additional resources and additional support in order to be successful in public schools. So you can just see that the typical student in Maryland is a free and reduced price meal student, and it ranges from around 27% in Carroll to over 80% in Dorchester County. And as you can see, many of the local school systems on the Eastern Shore has a very high percentage of students. And like, for example, we talk about that Talbot County, for example, is a high wealth jurisdiction. That just means that the local tax base in Talbot County is more affluent due to some of the waterfront properties and some of the high income earners in that jurisdiction. But as you see here, when you look at the public school students, nearly 60% of the public school students in Talbot County are eligible for free and reduced price meals. So that is a high need school system. And if you turn to the next page, 47, which shows students that are identified as English language learners, Talbot County is ranked 3rd in the state with the percentage of students that are receiving English language learners, around 16% of the student body. Only Prince George's and Montgomery County has a higher share of English language learners. And as you can also see, other local school systems on the Eastern Shore, like Wycomico, that's ranked number 5. Caroline County, that's ranked number 8, also has a high share of English language learners. And page 48 provides you information with students receiving special education services. And here you can see that in Kent, Somerset, and Cecil County, over 15% of students are eligible to receive special education services. And Cecil County is ranked number 1 in the state at 18.5%. So these are just some of the highlights that we wanted to share with you regarding your state funds for FY25. All of these resources, once again, are on our webpage, and our office will be more than willing to stop by and talk with yourself or your staff to go over any specific exhibits you may want to talk about. We just wanted to give you some of the highlights and give you an opportunity to ask questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And members, any questions for DLS while we have them today? All right, sounds like we have a quiet delegation today. I do have a couple questions. You know, the first one that I have goes to the the number of fiscal briefings that we've had. I think we've had 2, one in committee and one with the caucus, and it's clear to me that over the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to have some major budget challenges. Most of those attributed to, Blueprint and the increase of that program as we move on. So the question is, and I try to tie this question in with, the local aid and what's happening in each of these counties. But at what point, because I feel like we've been down this road before, back in 2008, 2010, at what point does the state's fiscal budget challenges, trickle down to the counties, and what will that look like? And then secondly, with education spending taking this, such a big part of the budget discussion, at what point do we as local electeds need to engage with the administration and the passage of the budget to hold our local counties harmless during difficult fiscal times? So that's kind of a policy question. I know you're probably not in a position to get too deep into that, but I think you can see through the numbers that we've got some difficulties ahead, and just wanted to get your global thoughts as we look out the next few years.
So currently, with the budget reconciliation, with the BRFA, that the administration is proposing 2 changes that's already going to have a financial impact on local governments. One is next year, the $6.5 million reduction in highway user revenues. And also there's a BRFA item to reduce funding for local community colleges. We didn't talk about community college funding in this report, but just an example, like Cecil College will get a $1.1 million reduction under the CADE formula. There's like a $1.1 million reduction for Chesapeake College. So there are reductions there. Warwick Community College is a $1.4 million reduction. So the administration is already identifying some local state aid programs to reduce. And so as the fiscal condition deteriorates, you can probably see some more of these BRFA reductions that could constrain state aid programs. I think so far as in the past, funding for public schools, which is most of your state aid, they try to protect, but it all depends on the financial resources that the state has. So in the past, the state has cuts funding to local governments. And so that puts extra pressure on local governments to backfill some of these reductions, primarily what has happened for highway user revenues.
Yeah. Okay. I have some other questions, but let me just pass it on to the members who are wanting to chime in. I think I saw Delegate Sample Hughes' hand first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I apologize if you went over this, Hiram. I really appreciate you providing us this presentation. I'm also on the AELR meeting right now talking about striped bass. So I just have one question. Earlier, you had mentioned about the tax effort and the maximum of 3.2%. And you referenced Cecil County below that to, I think it was like 2.7%. With that being said, can you tell me what Wycomico's was in that percentage? And that is why the disparity grant is $2.2 million reduction?
But Wycomico, for the other jurisdictions on the Eastern Shore, they all have the maximum 3.2% local income tax rate. So that is why they are guaranteed at least 75% of their formula calculation. So the primary reason why Wycomico County is receiving a decrease in their disparity grant funding is due to the narrowing of the income disparities in tax year 2022 between the high wealth jurisdictions and the low wealth jurisdictions. And FY24, most of the jurisdictions on the Eastern Shore realized record increases in their disparity grant funding because in tax year 2021 was the year that FY24 funding was based on. The more affluent jurisdictions had record increases in their net taxable income that was above the increases for disparity grant counties. This year, the funding is based on tax year 2022, and for tax year 2022, the high wealth jurisdictions like Montgomery and Howard actually had decreases in their per capita income tax yield, whereas jurisdictions like Wycomico had an increase. So that is basically what is causing the disparity grant formula to constrict in FY25. It's actually going back down to more normal times. And funding for FY25 for the disparity grant counties, for Wycomico County, will still be $1.2 million higher than their funding in FY23. So what happened was, for example, in Wycomico County, due to the large above average increases in net taxable income in the affluent jurisdictions, the disparity grant program statewide increased by $59 million in FY24. Wycomico County got a $3.2 million funding increase in FY24. They're getting a $2 million reduction this year, but they will still be $1.2 million above where they were in FY23. So in short, FY24 was a record increase in funding for disparity grant counties, and that was due to very high income tax yields in the affluent counties in relation to the disparity grant. Now that has reversed. The disparity grant counties in tax year 22, their income tax yields are now higher, growing higher than the affluent jurisdictions. And some of this had to do with capital gains. Capital gains is a big driver for the net taxable income yields in some of the more affluent jurisdictions. And sometimes there are very wide swings in capital gains, and that's what has happened this year and last year.
Okay, and then one last point. You mentioned, I know we've been talking about the community colleges, and in particular, you referenced $1.4 million for Warwick Community College. Does that also include the small colleges fund that we had? I think that was included about 5-6 years ago.
This is just
as well, or are we just looking at this $1.4 million decrease in Warwick's budget?
This is just funding under the CADE formula, and this is a decrease from what under the current law. So I can give you some more information on that.
Okay. Okay, I was just concerned about the multiple cuts. So,
right.
All right. Thank you, though. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Aaron's.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Hiram. Good to see you again. Two quick things. Do you know how many fee increases are in this current budget?
We'll have to have our budget office answer that for you. Yeah.
And there's nobody here from the budget office, right?
Right. So we'll get that question answered for you.
Okay, I've heard rumors it's around 80, but if you could get that for us, I think it'd be interesting for the people to hear. The other question I have, and this is more an opinion I'm asking for. We've seen a major increase in assessments and stuff. Is the plan for the state to offload more of the budget problems, the deficit we're going to face? Is it planned to push more of that back to the counties? Do you know?
The only thing that I know of is the BRFA reductions that are already in the Budget Reconciliation Act. And those reductions have to be approved by the General Assembly. So the administration has proposed those two reductions. It has to be approved by the General Assembly, but I'm not aware of any other reductions. But, you know, going forward, when you looked at the state fiscal briefing that DLS did, it just shows you that the structural deficit is increasing. So either you have to add on additional revenues or you're going to have to cut existing spending. And as we said at the beginning of the presentation, state aid accounts for around a third of your general fund budget and around 26% of your overall state funded budget. So it's a large portion of your state budget.
Okay.
And most of that is public school funding.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Delegate Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. And I have a question. It's kind of a threefold question all about the same topic, and that's the CADE funding, which is in the BRFA, the reduction. So we see that the formula was cut for the community colleges. My question is, so normally when something's in the BRFA, isn't it just like per year, or is this something I heard you say this, so they'll do it this year, and then how do they address that next year? They put it in the BRFA again, or will they then change law? How do they do that? If you could explain that first, and then the next question, how much did the four-year colleges, universities get cut this year? I didn't see anything in the budget where they were cut. And according to the data, I mean, it's clear data that our universities have been losing enrollment and our community colleges have been increasing enrollment. So when the governor proposes these cuts in the BRFA, do they give you reasoning why? That would be interesting to know. So that's kind of a threefold question.
Okay. Well, the first question I can answer is that when the Budget Reconciliation Financing Act is introduced, the changes sometimes the changes could be 1 year, but also the changes could be permanent. And my understanding is that when they make the change to the BRFA, that the changes to the community college will be ongoing. So they only need to make the change one time. They just need to make the one-time statutory change, and then it will just continue into the future. Our budget office will have to get back with you on the funding for the institutions of Maryland.
Okay. And do they, the third part of that, they give you any kind of data or any kind of reasoning for the BRFA decreases, or they just say, okay, do this?
Well, I'm sure that our budget analyst who did a presentation on this can probably get back with you on that. So I'm sure that the budget analyst for the community college has that information for you. So I'll have them reach out to your office.
I appreciate that. I think that would be very interesting, being that, it's clearly that our community colleges are doing an excellent job and they cannot afford this cut, and especially if you're saying that it's, this year and, in out years. So it's very disturbing. Thank you very much.
Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Hiram and DLS, for the information. My question is about the education funding formula. As you'll recall, during Kerwin, we had a Kerwin funding group, but they did not review and revise the education funding formula during that process. So you have and continue to have situations where, a county like Worcester County that puts at the county level 75+% of its own money into education, because the formula does not factor in, poverty levels and demographics. And I guess my question for you is, you know, whereas you have the rest of the counties, for the most part statewide, they are receiving 75 to 80% in state aid and only putting about 20% at the county level. So the question is the only way to have some levity, you know, with, you know, right now that would be, you know, some unfairness in this formula, when it comes to counties like Worcester, is the only way to, you know, have some, you know, to kind of make up for that is to do increases in programs like, you know, special education, free and reduced meals, where you know, the poverty levels are factored in, so all counties would get an increase. And is that the only way to make up for the fact that the situation that Worcester County is in right now, or are there other options?
Well, I think the difference is that if we go to, we can just, Arnold, if we go to page 34, it kind of shows you the state education funding under the foundation program. And that's the main education funding program. It's wealth neutralized. And here you can see that Worcester County ranks number 23, Talbot County is ranked 24. So the funding under those programs are less than the funding that you get on page 36. So you talk about, let's go to page 36. You talk about the targeted programs under compensatory and English language learners. Two things that is moving Worcester County up to number 18 and Talbot County up to 13 is, one, you have a higher share of targeted students in relation to other jurisdictions. So you do have higher need students. And so the formula takes that into account. In addition, the local wealth weights are different. Under these targeted programs, the local wealth formula is less. There's a minimum funding level that local school systems receive under this program that is higher than under the foundation program. So the formulas do recognize the fact under these targeted programs that these at-needs school systems with a higher targeted student population does receive more state funds, and also your minimum funding level is at a higher level than under the foundation program. But what's important to note is that the tax base in Worcester and Talbot County is also still much higher than a Somerset and a Caroline County. So even though that you have a higher share of you have a high level of targeted students, your local government still has a larger tax base that they can utilize to fund these services. So that is why even programs under the targeted student populations is adjusted for local wealth. It's just that there's a higher minimum funding level for all the local school systems under this program. And I can send you an exhibit that kind of shows that. But you got to keep in mind that under the funding formulas, local wealth is a primary driver on how much state funding a local school system is going to get. And we have an exhibit that kind of illustrates this. Arnold, if we can go back to our webpage.
So here, I guess my question is, I'm aware that wealth formula is driving it. It doesn't, you know, when you look at a Worcester County, it doesn't then seem to factor in, for instance, the southern part of the county, you know, Snow Hill, Pocomoke, and areas that would not reflect that formula, the way it's currently written.
Right, but Arnold, can you bring us to our webpage? It's very important for me to show them this information. We have an exhibit. If you go to the Eastern Shore, state aid to the Eastern Shore, and go to page 7, go to the last page. This is basically showing you the two primary taxes that local governments have is your property taxes and also your income taxes. And these are the two wealth measures that are used to allocate state aid. And as you can see for Worcester County, and this is based on their FY24 budget, Worcester County has the lowest local income tax rate and has the third lowest property tax rate on the Eastern Shore. And as you can see, just comparing Wicomico and Worcester, Wicomico County can collect almost $3,000 per county resident with their current tax rate, and Wicomico can only collect $714. And when you look at their income tax, Wicomico County has the highest maximum local income tax rate of 3.2%. Worcester has a rate that's almost 1% lower, and they still are able to collect more money on a per capita basis than a Wicomico. So what this is basically showing you is that we have to take into account local wealth to offset the local tax collection ability at the local level. On the Eastern Shore, you have some jurisdictions that are already imposing the highest local income tax rate, and they collect a significant amount less than a Talbot County and a Wicomico County that has lower tax rates. So that's all the formula is doing, is recognizing the fact that particularly in Queen Anne's, Talbot, and Worcester County, the local tax base is so much higher than the other jurisdictions on the Eastern Shore that the state has to provide additional support to the other jurisdictions just to offset what the local governments can collect on their own. And so that is just the reason why it's not looking at the residents. So for example, in Worcester County, the property tax collections, a large portion of that is due to Ocean City. It's not even paid by the residents of Worcester County. It's paid by, a lot of them are hotels, second homes in Ocean City. The property wealth in Ocean City is what's driving the property tax collection for Worcester County. So we're just,
Yeah, I'll probably follow up. I might not be being clear. And this discussion, as you know, started back during the Kerwin funding group when we were trying to look at that. So
just
and so that's part of the issue to me, is that, the fact that when you by not looking, when you look at the demographics, yes, you have the the second homeowners driving some, but it just doesn't seem to factor in the demographics of the makeup of the the southern part of the county.
Well, the demographics are incorporated in your student enrollment count. So for those targeted student populations under compensatory aid, under English language learners, and under special education, the demographics are incorporated in the student enrollment counts that are included in those formulas. And that is why Worcester and Talbot are more in the middle on a per pupil funding basis. They're not at the bottom as they are under the foundation program. So those targeted programs do incorporate your demographics, but at the same time, the formulas also incorporates the fact that the tax bases in those jurisdictions are large enough to also provide additional support for those targeted students as well.
Which kind of, and I'll wrap up, which kind of answers my question, which is, if you get the bump up in those other targeted areas, that's one way that it seems to be, that's the way that you get a little bit more equity for like counties like Worcester and Talbot. But to be followed up. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, last question, Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Hiram, really appreciate these every year. Lots of information. 2 questions. With the disparity grants aside, does the state incentivize or give different assistance levels based on the county's income or property tax? In other words, if you move up to the high end, do you get more state assistance? versus if you're at a lower tax rate. So, and again, excluding the disparity grant.
All right. Probably the only, not particularly, no.
Okay.
There's no state aid program that is based on that. However, there is the guaranteed tax base program for public schools where the funding is based on the local appropriation that the county government gives to the local school system. So that's not really driving per se what your tax rates should be, but if you do provide additional funding at a certain level, you do get additional state support, and that's really only for low wealth jurisdictions as well. So basically, there is no state law that says that you have to have a certain tax rate.
Okay, and the term that you used again was guaranteed tax base?
It's the guaranteed tax base program that bases additional state aid to certain low wealth jurisdictions based on the county appropriation to the local board of education.
And then what counties are in that low wealth cohort on the Eastern Shore?
Okay.
You can get that to us later if you don't know it.
Well, it's on page, we have that actually on page, it's on page 34.
Okay.
So the jurisdictions that receives that is Caroline County, Dorchester, Somerset, and Wycomico. So
And
it's
they're the only
Caroline
ones that are able to opt into it if they choose.
Right. Well, those are the ones that are currently receiving funding under the guaranteed tax base program. Caroline County gets around 1.7 million. Dorchester gets 1.6 million. Somerset receives 1.6 million, and Wycomico gets 7.3 million. And that's on page 34.
But could other counties, if they chose to, also receive it?
Well, it depends on your local wealth. So I don't think no other jurisdiction will either be eligible to receive it.
Okay, great. That's what I was looking for. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And we'll be more than willing to stop by your office or talk with your staff if you have any questions regarding the exhibits or the information that we have available.
Thank you so much.
Okay, DLS, thank you very much for the presentation. This is one of our highlights every year. And I say highlights, the budget is always a difficult thing, but it's good to understand it, and we appreciate you giving us clarity. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Next up is Maryland Municipal League. Good morning, MML.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. For those I haven't met in person recently, my name is Teresa Kuhns. I serve as a CEO for MML. The league is now 160 local governments across the state, but our biggest arm is Eastern Shore. As I'm sure you're all aware, we're very proud of that as well. So thank you on behalf of our leadership, Mayor John Carroll of Galena is our president this year, and just everything you've done for our municipalities, cities, and towns. I know ESAM dinner was 2 weeks ago now, and I appreciate everyone's participation and being a part of that. I'm going to let Angelica speak about advocacy, but I wanted to do a quick few things, and I am going to speak quickly because I know you're running behind. If you haven't seen our monthly magazine, let me know. I'll bring some copies over to your office. We actually did an economic impact study of our cities and towns in the state. We wanted everyone to see that. We have some great data in here. A lot of these questions that you're asking, you can find in this study and the impact your cities and towns in your district actually have on the state budget. And I think we'll find some really good data in there. I would like to also let you know that we have an advocacy day. It's our inaugural day on February 29th this year. So you'll see an Eastern Shore delegation meeting likely on your schedule for that morning. Not only do our mayors come in for a 2-day winter conference, we're actually opening it up to others, including staff and other officials and council members. So we're very excited for that morning. The mayors will be in town February 29th to March 1st. So I'm expecting you'll have some requests for meetings during that time as well directly. And beyond that, we will be doing a regional engagement tour. We actually spent time in the upper part of Eastern Shore in September with our full board and the governor's team in September. We're going to the lower shore on May 30th. And we'll be down there talking about some of the things that we're doing and really learning from our cities and towns, what we can bring back to Annapolis to share with you. And then our Ocean City Conference, 53rd year in Ocean City is June 23rd to the 26th. And we'll be bringing our fall conference to Hyatt Cambridge on November 6th to November 8th. There's a lot of opportunity at those two conferences to bring you all in as speakers and interacting with our members. So if you have an interest or a certain topic you'd like to come in, please let us know. Our Ocean City Conference last year almost hit 2,000 members. This last year's fall conference is over 400. So we have a lot of engagement right now and a lot of energy in our membership. And we love to have you all a part of that. And I'm going to hand it over to Angelica to talk about some of our priorities this year.
Good morning, everyone. Angelica Bailey-Thupari. I'm the Advocacy Director for the Maryland Municipal League. Lovely to see you all. Thank you for your time. So MML has three proactive legislative priorities this year that were approved unanimously by our Legislative Committee and MML's Board of Directors. The first is speed camera standardization. So basically, right now, only police officers are permitted by law to certify speed camera tickets, but that's not the case for red light camera tickets. For those, it just needs to be someone trained. It can be trained personnel. It does not have to be a sworn officer. And as I'm sure many of you know, many municipal police departments are chronically understaffed, and the cost and difficulty of recruiting and retaining officers increases daily. Our towns consider speed cameras to be a vital piece of public safety equipment, but they also need to make the most efficient use of the limited officers that they have. So this bill this year requests that municipalities be permitted to do the same for speed cams as they can with red light tickets, and allow a trained personnel to certify those tickets instead of requiring a police officer to do so. And we expect that this will provide substantial cost and safety benefit to our communities. Our other two priorities recognize that, the state is obviously facing some financial challenges, but so are local governments. We have to continue to provide quality services to our residents and continue to do more with less, as we always do. So our next two priorities look at existing methods of generating revenues to, spur some economic development in our towns, hopefully without going to the state for a handout. So we're very excited to have Delegate Wayne Hartman as our House sponsor for our tourism zones bill, and Senator Michael Jackson as our Senate sponsor. That is Senate Bill 14, and the House bill number is coming soon. This bill would allow municipalities, including Baltimore City, to self-designate what we're calling tourism zones. The goal is to help increase, quality of life for our residents, generate some excitement about visiting the area, hopefully increase tourism, and drive some dollars into our towns and cities. It is enabling. So if your little town is nice and quiet and you want to keep it that way, you totally can. The way that it works is locals would take the financial hit at first, but the hope is that, we spend a little to make more down the line. So the locals could designate the zone, and within the zone, grant property tax credits, reduce administrative fees, things like business licensing, to hopefully entice new businesses. It doesn't mess with anything on the state level. We can only cut the things that we have control over, like those admin fees and locally mandated fees. So we're very excited about that one, bipartisan support so far, and some public support from the administration as well. And then our third priority deals with the admissions and amusement tax, and we are going in with MAKO on this one. Right now, local governments can impose an admissions and amusement, I'm going to say A&A tax, on revenue that's made from admissions and amusement activities in the town. So things like, price of admission, use of a game or rec facility, and rec and sports equipment rentals, things like that. But we do not have the authority to impose A&A on the sale of food and beverages that are consumed on premises. So if you go see a local band, we can assess the A&A tax on the price of admission. And if you buy merch, if you get a t-shirt for the band, there's sales tax on that. But if you get a Diet Coke or a hot dog, we get nothing. The exception, of course, is Worcester County and Ocean City that can charge up to 0.5%, or that is charging up to 0.5, can charge up to 1%, but that is very specific to help pay down the debt on the convention center, and that does not apply to the rest of Maryland's municipalities. So what we're looking to do this year is a very simple change. Just let both counties and municipalities charge A&A on food and beverage, and let us go as high as 2%. So we're excited about that. We are working with both chambers, and the bill should be dropping shortly. So that was short and sweet. I know you guys have a short time today, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we do. Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. Great presentation. On the A&A, we have as you know, a municipality that's struggling with how to appropriately tax a water park, because they seem to be in this sort of gray area where they don't fall under the amusements, don't fall under the hotel. So they're kind of, skirted a number of these taxes. Would you be amenable to adding that on to this A&A? Because I think right now they're not eligible.
I'd be happy to take a look at any language. I am cognizant of how, I don't want to say controversial, but tricky A&A and food and bev can be. So we are trying to thread the needle very narrowly with this, but we're always open to the conversation. I'd be happy to take a look at language.
And the bill is enabling, right, that these
It is.
municipalities. Okay, thank you so much.
Yep, absolutely.
So I have a question. MML in years past has had interest with 5G and the siting and having local discretion as to how that goes, how that happens. So my question is that still an issue for MML, or is that sorted out?
It's not one of our legislative priorities this year, but local authorization and statewide mandates on local governments when we have such limited resources are always one of our main values. So if any legislation comes down the pike that addresses that, we would definitely be paying close attention to it.
Right. So, I mean, look, I think we get I think we all get constituent complaints about the quality wireless service. And, the problem with 5G appears to be that they need more of these locations, and they need to be closer together to make it work. So they're faster, but they're, I'm a layman, so I don't know what the term is, but if they're faster, but they don't have as wide a range would be the way to look at it. So, there are areas like, Preston in my area. Certainly I live in Hebron, and cell service has been difficult. So your organization, in partnership with these companies, it's important that I hear that that's moving in a productive direction, obviously from your perspective, but know that that's one of these top constituent complaints that come from our citizens that live in these wonderful municipalities, getting access to the phone service, right?
Thank you. I hear that, Mr. Chair, and that is something that we hear from our Eastern Shore municipalities. We did not receive a request this year for proactive legislation on that topic from our Eastern Shore municipalities, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do in the future, and we'll be taking a close look at that.
Okay, and in the interim, most of our members are reaching out to the service providers and sharing our concerns, which is certainly it is one of our top concerns coming from constituents. Any other questions for MML? Right, seeing none. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you all.
Okay, we missed you last week, federal partners, and let's see. I'll start with Kim Cradable. I see you in Senator Cardin's office there.
Yes, and once again, thank you all for having us last week. He enjoyed his time with you all. Just not too much. Just Alyssa Hastings, who is here from Senator Van Hollen, and I are going to set aside a couple of days for folks that are interested in having individual meetings regarding congressionally directed spending. So once again, we're here. Feel free to reach out. Any constituent services that you need, please feel free to reach out to us. Thanks.
Okay, Alyssa Hastings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to echo what Kim just said, just a reminder, that's local governments that are eligible for the congressional funding buckets and nonprofits. So those are two buckets that are available. And thanks, and have a good weekend now.
Okay, right. I'm not seeing. Is Andy Harris's office on the?
Yeah, I'm on. It's Jackie.
Sorry. These Zoom calls. It's like Brady Bunch.
I know, right? Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for having us. So just as for our federal update, there are now specific allocations for each appropriations bill now. Negotiations are currently going on between the House and Senate for how that money is going to be spent, as well as what policy riders are going to be kept in. There's a rumor bordered bill coming out of the Senate, but it does not appear to deter illegal immigration, and in fact codifies the activity by providing more funds to process illegal immigrants rather than enforce the laws. The Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas' articles of impeachment have moved out of the Homeland Security Committee and may come up on the floor for a vote soon. This is in regards to what some would say is his intentional mishandling of the southern border. There was a bill that just recently extended some business tax breaks and child tax credits that were in the Tax and Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, and it passed the House. It was very beneficial to businesses, but Congressman Harris did vote against it because the child tax credit would apply to even those who don't pay any taxes. So it essentially was a welfare program. And there's another tax bill introduced regarding state and local tax deductions. It would get rid of the marriage penalty and allow deductions up to $20,000 for married couples and up to $500,000, which benefits middle income families. Congressman Harris has co-sponsored that. He wanted to just tell everyone how much he appreciated the involvement in the Wynn hearing, and special thanks to Senator Carrozza and Delegate Hartman for their very insightful testimony. As another reminder, FEMA for firefighter grants are currently online. We have reached out to the fire companies by email, and we'll be sending letters, and I'll send that to Delegate Adams. I'll send that to your office as well for that information, so you have it for your companies as well. The congressman last Friday was in Hartford and Cecil counties visiting local businesses and nonprofits. And that is all I have. Again, our office is always available for any concerns you have. Reach out. We're there for constituents. So please reach out to our office for anything you need or any questions you have.
Okay, members, any questions for our federal partners before we move on?
Just one final piece on that, if I can. Thank you so much for mentioning the firefighting grants. I forgot to mention that, but if we can provide, all of our offices can provide letters of support for any.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you very much. Delegate Grice, I wanted to take a minute in the open part of our meeting to talk about your role with appropriations and then community college funding. Senator Carrozza just sent me a text message. She had to hop off, but encouraging anything that we can do to support, well, certainly community college funding. And down here on the Lower Shore, that means Warwick, where you're from, Chesapeake, and then up in Cecil County as well. So did you want to talk a little bit about that? And I did submit a draft letter to the members that we could get a vote on after getting kind of your thoughts on it.
Okay, yeah, we voted on that last week, and I appreciate everybody's support in sending that letter. So our community colleges met yesterday, and we did have a appropriations leadership meeting last week, and I'm confident that our committee, we're probably going to eliminate that provision in the BRFA, that we do have to find. It looks like it's going to be about $38 million in cuts from somewhere else, or reduce spending in other parts of the budget, which for me is going to be an easy task. I've already identified over $1 billion on 4 pages. So even if we scale back a lot of those increases, that'll more than cover the community colleges. And it's critically important that we change or we eliminate that BRFA, because like it was said, it's a permanent cut to the community colleges because it permanently changes the CADE formula, and we certainly don't want to do that.
So you're
but
saying,
I'm confident we'll get it restored.
Okay, that's good to hear, because that's a big problem for us on the shore, without a doubt. Okay, and you're right, we did vote on that letter last week. It was at the very end. So members, I did send a copy of the letter. We'll send that out by the end of the day today. Jeff's on signature line as well. Is there anything else for the good of the order before we adjourn? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adjourn in a second?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, aye. Have a good day, guys.
See ya.